Welcome to this week's edition of People Over Politics. We have a brand new guest coming all the way from New Jersey, of course, still the East Coast. There's a lot going on, of course, around cannabis and, a lot of positive things. So, thanks for joining us, Sonia.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking me to participate in this conversation because, yes, we're still on the East Coast. And, a lot of the policies that, came out of New Jersey were influenced by policies that, were enacted prior to ours. And, I know DC has, a history of, their own history of cannabis, regulations and legalization. So, um, thank you very much for inviting me into this convo.
Ooh, excuse me.
God bless you.
Yes, pollen's still crazy. So my allergies. It was a nice day outside. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, and of course I could bring up later when we're talking about pollen, because I actually do have a question related to CBD, honey, and pollen. But you have a very interesting role in the cannabis ecosystem. You're doing a lot for your community. I saw a lot of acronyms to describe you: MSW, LCSW, LCADC. What are some of these acronyms? And who are you as the Happy Therapist? Just for some people who might not know you, it's a trademarked entity. So yeah.
Absolutely. MSW is a degree, so it's a master's in social work.
Okay.
LCSW stands for licensed clinical social worker. LCADC stands for licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor. So those are both clinical licenses that I hold in the Board of Consumer Affairs in the state of New Jersey. And then I also have jurisdiction with these licenses ever since the beginning of COVID. I was able to file paperwork and get temporary jurisdiction in Delaware, Pennsylvania, and New York as well. So I'm able to provide interventions and services for individuals that are coping with the entire milieu of mental health symptoms, disorders, illnesses, as well as substance abuse disorders, illnesses, as well as addiction related conditions. So that's a little bit about my background.
Okay.
And a lot of my training over the course of my career has been in substance use, as well as specializing in substance use and mental health.
Sure, sure. I mean, and just quick question, and then kicking off. Are you a medical patient? Are you a patient? Are you
A cannabis patient?
yes, like
Yes,
cannabis.
I am.
Oh,
I'm a registered. I've been a registered patient since 2017.
ah,
2017 is actually when I started my cannabis health programming, and I was initially I was providing counseling and intervention services for individuals that were self-medicating for PTSD or anxiety symptoms. I provided a counseling intervention where I was able to evaluate them, provide them an eligible diagnosis, and then we would get them certified for their medical marijuana cards at that time.
oh, that is awesome. Getting people certified, and the reason I asked if you were a
That's
patient
how we
because
started in 2017.
in 17, okay, and that's a great way to start out. But the reason I asked if you were a patient because I've been a patient for a few years now, and definitely been more diligent in doing my research. Of course, a lot of the different doctors, a lot of the people in the industry, I'm surprised about how many aren't patients or weren't previous consumers, and still aren't consumers. So I think that there is some value to being a patient yourself, and or having being a consumer previously. I think that, of course, everyone can serve a purpose in the cannabis ecosystem. But I definitely appreciate people who have, the firsthand, knowledge and experience, because I think that, you could truly be just a little more helpful, just a little more helpful. And then, I think that you also understand things from a consumer perspective, and, you could be really more helpful to the community that way.
Absolutely. I do say that my personal involvement in the cannabis community allows me to have or develop a special relationship with the community as a patient, because I'm at the forefront of what they need and identifying with their needs as a social worker. Because prior to being a clinician and prior to me becoming a therapist, I started off my career as a master's level social worker and worked towards getting these doctorate level licenses so I could do the work that I do today. But I became a medical marijuana patient to treat anxiety and stress that was work related. Actually, it was career related, because when I was going through the process of trying to become a therapist and going through that process as a first generation born American, I went through a lot of mental health symptoms that I wasn't really familiar with, that were hard for me to stabilize when I was trying to study and when I was trying to focus on, furthering my career. So the only resolve that I could really find at that time was, or healthy resolve that I agreed with, was medical cannabis. And that's because I personally wasn't a fan of psychotropic medication. Even as a therapist, whenever I worked in outpatient centers, before I started my own private practice in 2017, that grew into the agency that it is today, I never was a fan of referring my patients for medication. But as a therapist, it's part of, um, I guess, our, recommendations when we're conducting initial assessments. If our clients are experiencing mental health symptoms, we have to provide recommendations for them to stabilize those symptoms. So oftentimes that's with either certain practices or recommending them for other interventions. And a medication referral is an intervention. However, mental health sufferers began to have an option in the state that I am located in, which is in New Jersey. Ever since 2014, people that had PTSD or anxiety have an opportunity to use an alternative medicine. So, I think that, me having a personal relationship with cannabis definitely, allowed me to, um, be passionate about my business, putting together my curriculum, and then just engaging with the public and letting them know that this was an option, and that here I am, I'm a mental health sufferer. And, this is something that you could safely use with the right support, with the right tools, with the right education. There's a way that we could provide harm reduction strategies to make this an option for you. So, I would say that, becoming a medical marijuana patient and using it daily in my own regimen, allows me to be true to, I guess what I'm recommending when I'm, recommending psychoactive medications to my clients.
Sure, sure. And a lot of great things you hit on. The first thing, New Jersey's come a long way, right? So New Jersey was definitely ahead of Maryland with medical, and they already are ahead of Maryland with the recreational. Decrim, destigmatization always comes with that. One of the things I remember was probably 15, maybe 13 years ago. I remember it was a family from New Jersey who moved to, I think, Arizona or Washington. Um, I believe it was one of those two states, but they had a medical program that existed already. And, this was crucial for that family because they had a pediatric medical patient, basically. Basically, I think his condition was epilepsy. It was an epilepsy case. And so they had moved, and, the difference was, of course, living in New Jersey at that time, this person, he was undergoing hundreds of seizures a day and wasn't able to kind of, live a normal life. Moved, was able to get the medicine he needed, of course, the natural plant that he needed. And, actually, I think there was an actual strand designed specifically for epilepsy. I think it's called Charlotte's Web. But after that, full 180, quality of life up. But the thought is like New Jersey's come a long way. Now they have medical, now they have rec, and other states, are following that trend. But one of the things that, I think that is different, and especially that I'm including in the conversation, is how cannabis can be used to, curb opioid abuse, especially. And, I'm sure it's a problem, in New Jersey. It's definitely a problem in several areas in Maryland, like, where we have, some opioid capitals, and especially in some places that you wouldn't expect. But I know that the most recent report I read is like, medical cannabis can decrease opioid abuse by like 30%. And I thought that was really big of what you were doing when I met you at the Black Cannabis Conference, because you actually, you're grassroots. You're going, you're talking to people, you're recommending things, and you're looking at, of course, substance abuse, completely differently, right? In a humane way. So, how has that response been in your community, and especially, in areas where they might not have understood the culture of alternative medicine before, in respects to substance abuse and the alternative steering and guidance and stuff like that.
Well, I think that a lot of clinicians over the last year or so, ever since, recreation no law came into place in New Jersey, a lot of clinicians, medical practitioners, and professionals in all regards are, they're rethinking their perspective on how they're viewing cannabis. So when I first started my cannabis program, this was 2017. What I was doing was not, I guess, well respected in my own professional community.
You're the black sheep. You're the black
Yeah,
sheep.
yeah. But I mean, it was really about the community. It's about the public. It's about one, me being not only a social entrepreneur and an independent business owner, but me creating a service that, as a licensed clinical social worker, that the public needed. And the public, the community, showed that this is something that they preferred, that they wanted, right? Because I don't think that I would have seen um such a significant, response and level of support from the community. Hence why me as a clinician, I've always connected with the cannabis community in general, and then mental health sufferers, because those are the ones that matter the most. My professional community, those are the individuals that still need to be educated. They require, I guess, a relearning of the things that we learned when we were early, like, very early stage clinicians. Because most health practitioners, unless they're not trained in this country, are trained to look at these substances as something that is harmful, clearly, right? Because they're
Yeah.
Schedule 1, right? So luckily Biden, said something yesterday that, gives us hope that this is going to change pretty
Step,
soon.
step one of Biden. Like, I'm happy, but I don't have blind faith, Biden. I'm reading between those lines, and you know, there needs to be some more meat.
And I know you know better. You're near DC. I know that you're probably, more politically, way more politically involved than I am. So I can understand that. But I think that even acknowledging it and saying like, hold on, this is classified totally wrong. So, first off, we have to change that so that, more people that hold the type of licensing that I do, that come from clinical backgrounds and have training that I do, can, step forward and also support and advocate for these type of alternative medicines. But I mean, the truth is most clinicians are scared to recommend something that is federally not approved,
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
They have that fear. Me, I guess I've always had a brave personality, right? So I think that a lot of the work that I've done also, I guess represents who I am as a person, because I've always been the type of person that never really cared what people think. So, as a business owner and as a licensed clinical social worker, I was trained to, identify unmet needs that, people in our community suffer from. And then to social workers are the ones that are the forefront of developing policies, developing programming, developing services that then address those needs. So early on, with that education and then the education that I had in mental health, being a mental health therapist and counselor, and then being a substance abuse counselor, I felt like, the right thing to do would be to, support people with, the option of medical marijuana. But most clinicians are still catching up to, understanding that, this has roots, historical roots that are medicinal, going back from Chinese dynasty. And
Before Christ, before Christ, you know,
before Christ, before Christ was the
the different
Chinese,
the
the Chinese
dynasty.
dynasty. So like I'm a Punjabi woman, so I'm a first generation American born. I was born in Jamaica, Queens, raised in New Jersey, but my lineage comes from Punjab, and that's the northern state of India that is right under near the Ganges, the Himalayas, a place in the world that is, known for a lot of spiritual manifestation and cannabis, and historically spiritual cannabis use. So historically in my culture, they have these spiritual teachings, these Bibles, right? They're called the Vedas. And in the Vedas, like cannabis was written thousands of years ago as being medicinal and spiritual,
Of
right?
course, of
So,
course,
as a clinician, you know, it's like there's no question that this is medicine. It has roots in medicine. Never, that was never such a thing. It was really just teaching people to demystify the stigma, to teach them, the healthy practices of using this in a medicinal way. Because what society has been programmed to show us is often recreational use, because recreational use could turn into, abuse, just like any recreational abuse of, or use of any substance can become abusive.
sure,
So the images that we often see of cannabis are recreational use. We see that more than the actual medicinal use. And then the methods of using marijuana medicinally are much different. The
sure.
dosing is much different, right? And then there's specific strains, right? There's definitely a way that, you go about using your cannabis that, is unique to, what you're trying to treat and the effects that you're trying to get. So those are methods that anybody could learn, because it is a sophisticated substance. It is a mind altering psychoactive substance, but those are all symptoms and effects that can be controlled. So I think that's another thing that, my experience as a medical marijuana patient, it's something
Yeah,
that, I can attest to because I do it myself. Right. So
yeah,
it's not like I just teach my clients how to, regulate their own mental health symptoms and how to manage, their symptoms with cannabis. It's something that I practice myself, but then I also develop, programming, so other people could do it too as a practitioner.
yes. Becoming a more educated and aware consumer. I think that that's something you highlighted. I think in the medical market, we have that, the education, that education is key. We do need that in, recreational markets as, they continue to open up. I think going back to, something you said at the federal level, and, I think I brought up before in my podcast, a lot of times at the federal level, especially Congress, you see two fights going on at one time, one fight to legalize and then another fight to deschedule it or reschedule it, right? And a lot of times those are coupled together. I think that I said, like, kind of interesting theory was like, why not just focus on rescheduling, because that would change, a lot of things that, we in fact, in fact, um, keep us, behind with cannabis. And
Yeah.
I think that
The
it's
number one thing that keeps us behind is that we're living in such an advanced society where we could be conducting so much research, and like we can't conduct no research. So as a as a clinician, right, and also a medical cannabis consumer, I have limited studies, right? I have limited education and resources to share, but whatever we have, whatever that's there, that's what, we're able to use as our evidence-based resources. But of course, if we had more evidence, we would just be able to do so much for the people with cannabis, right?
Yes.
And then there's
And
so many possibilities there.
and that's really definitely one of the things, because you had kind of harped about the fact that when we see images, we see more recreational therapeutic cannabis usage than medical. And the medical aspect is the real medicine, because for me, like, a lot of people, whether you're self-medicating or you're actually prescribed, a lot of times it's still medication, it's still therapeutic. I believe in people use, right? And so you brought up the fact that you were taking risks early on. We've known some of the benefits of cannabis. There was a 1944 LaGuardia report, right? So it talked about a lot of the benefits of cannabis. Of course, that's one of the ones that got dug down. But I think that there's a reason that this fight has been against cannabis for so long, and I think that it really can repair the community, right? Like for me, I was on the panel in Philadelphia, and it says it's basically about, can cannabis repair the community? And then my last kind of question and standing question was, when hasn't cannabis been communal? Because for me, cannabis has always been communal. It's been long before being a patient. It was a space to connect with peers. It was a space to unwind. It was a space for reflection. As you said, it was a space to deal with trauma. And it the thought is like, I appreciate where we are, but I don't want to go to, the Walmarts of cannabises, which
Mhm.
right. So that's the future of like just standardized medicine, right? You don't have craft cannabis anymore. You don't have this desire, and then you also just have, what I see on the market is just these THCs that are ridiculous, synthetic, blends. Like I want my edibles made with real flour. You know what I mean? Like, and that's just me being,
That all. Mhm.
yeah, exactly. You
Mhm.
know, but I deviated. One of the questions I was going to ask you was, you being in the medical profession, there is going to be a fight in Maryland coming up. I don't know if you're familiar with Ryan's Law, but Ryan's Law from California basically gave access to medical cannabis patients, them to have access to their medicine and hospice care. But the caveat is they had to be terminally ill. And
Mhm.
so you probably heard of Connor Sheffield or the Connor Sheffield Foundation, or Connor and Rayner's Law, which in the state of Maryland gave pediatric, or not pediatric, but like nurses in schools, the ability to administer pediatric medicine, cannabis medicine to the pediatric patients. Because the way it worked out in Maryland, the parent had to come every day and take them off property, administer it, bring them back. So it was a stigmatization around. It was a disruption to the parent, to the environment, and then also, of course, to the child. So
Mhm.
that law passed, and the next fight will be hospice care. Do you feel as your work in substance abuse, could really speak to that? Because I think that one of the biggest arguments for that is you have people who are medical patients who decreased their prescription or chose alternative treatments, and now they ended up in hospital care where where they're denied their medicine, or they're given opioids again, which is something that they were once abused to. Do you like, has that ever become a conversation in New Jersey, or like, what are your sentiments on that?
Well, that's definitely an injustice. Um, and it's an it's a common injustice. It's a systematic injustice that a lot of clients that I've worked with have dealt with, especially if they're going through the criminal justice system. Because unfortunately, the criminal justice system looks at marijuana, I guess, still in an outdated way, in a sense, because, you know, for example, anyone that ever has to get a court disposition here in New Jersey, that court disposition, let's just say for anyone that has been arrested, is on pretrial release, or, is dealing with a drug related disposition, oftentimes, they're going to be mandated to counseling, right? And their court recommendations is going to be to follow the recommendations of that counseling program. So that's where the injustice often happens, because then they are at the mercy of the program, the program's policies, their beliefs, their practices. And the legal system depends on the licensed professionals and the treatment programs to be able to, and they use them as referral sources to be able to, provide these court ordered services. But once again, the catch is you have to follow the recommendations of that counselor. And as I shared with you, oftentimes, so in substance abuse counseling, right? So like mental health and substance abuse counseling go in hand. There's no way that you could be suffering from substance abuse or addiction and you don't have any mental health concerns. It's impossible. Substance abuse is automatically, a trigger for certain, you know, mental health symptoms and conditions. So, for anyone that is recommended for substance abuse treatment, right? Or court ordered for substance abuse treatment, they have to most likely get psychotropic medication if they're experiencing severe mental health symptoms. The liability of that treatment program is to stabilize that individual, is to make sure that they're no longer experiencing their mental health symptoms over time, and that we see a reduction in the frequency and the intensity of what they're experiencing. And that while we're working with them, so let's just say it's addiction, that we could help them get to a place where they're maintaining their sobriety. So for anyone that's ever been addicted to a substance, especially opiates, because opiates is like the number one substance abuse problem in New Jersey. I don't know about Maryland.
Yeah, it's big.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pills and heroin are the
Nation.
number one substance abuse problem. When I was working in outpatient treatment programs or intensive outpatient or even inpatient programs, the majority of our clients would be, opiate addicted. And then we would get them, and then, we would have to make sure that they're, a lot of times they had to go through a safe detox so we could even treat them or counsel them until they did a medical assisted detox,
Yeah.
because if not, it could be potentially fatal for them, and they wouldn't be able to get through the counseling.
And
So with that being said, it's often been a injustice that these individuals that have to get court ordered treatment are then at the mercy once again of these programs that are not very pro cannabis or pro medical cannabis. Even though medical cannabis is an option in New Jersey, that doesn't mean that when you go to a substance abuse treatment program that they're going to recommend you and support your medical cannabis use. And that is still, an injustice within the judicial system and their trust with, I guess, and these referrals to, to get substance
so,
abuse treatment.
so their immediate answer is psychotropics.
In most cases, so in most cases, if someone is experiencing severe mental health symptoms, right, and they're having a hard time managing those mental health symptoms on their own, and it's affecting or impairing several areas of their life, then we will recommend, several interventions for them to start to, address, heal, and treat those areas of their life and those symptoms. Psychotropic medication in most state funded, county funded, or like all those court referred programs, they all are traditional treatment programs. So traditional treatment programs, psychotropic medication referrals are definitely a part of the initial evaluation and recommendation process. And then counseling or whatever happens comes after. But medication is like always a referral. So like you said, a lot of these individuals escape opiates, but then might catch a charge per se, right? Like for example, they might catch a charge and then now, they're back in the auspices of the criminal justice system, part of their rights to treat themselves with options that they feel comfortable with, even if they're legal, are taken away from them.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
And
they're oftentimes forced to use psychotropics unless you work with a program or professional that can provide you harm reduction counseling and can provide you support in getting your medical marijuana card and then providing that reporting to probation. So whenever you like as a provider, whenever we get parole, probation, or court ordered referrals, they expect progress reports from us regarding these clients. So in my program, because we have a harm reduction, medical marijuana, mental health, and substance abuse treatment program, we provide updates on their medical marijuana use because we document and we monitor, like it's called medication management. Every therapist does this with their client. It's part of my job, but most often we do it with medication. I
yeah.
do it with medication and medical marijuana.
Mm, look at that. Like, I always would say everyone needs a little love and plant medicine. And I think that, whether you're, turning people completely to alternative treatment, I think that there is um, benefit in decreasing the amount of prescriptions, especially opioid or psychotropics. And then, as I think an earlier guest mentioned, sometimes, there's synergy. Sometimes you need some of these, medications, but then you introduce some of these alternative medicines. And so like my real like last longer question is, I know that you are a different social worker in the fact that you also talk about psychedelics. So not necessarily cannabis or hemp as we think about it, but even fungi and the mushrooms. So what has been your experience with psychedelics or mushrooms, and how you can treat substance abuse or trauma. um,
So, I mean, very recently, psilocybin has become more popular because of the legislation and what's happening with the legislation around psilocybin. So similarly to cannabis, psilocybin is being reviewed for its schedule, its federal scheduling as well. And it's been decriminalized in New Jersey, it's decriminalized in New York, it's decriminalized in a lot of states, right? But then it's also legal, it's available for legal treatment in Colorado and Oregon. So Colorado and Oregon, at one time, those were, I guess, the opening ports for the reintegration of medical cannabis. And
mm,
those are now the similar ports for the reintegration of psychedelic treatments to society. Because just like cannabis has history, right, with being a known medical substance, so
sure.
has a lot of these other plants that are restricted, from our use, including psilocybin. So, over the last year or so, I've invested a lot of my energy into training to become a psychedelic therapist because this is something that's also going to be available on the West Coast. Right now it's decriminalized, so as the clinician, I'm not able to provide um, psilocybin treatments. However, in the state of New Jersey, there is a substance called ketamine, and I'm currently getting trained and educated so that I could actually supplement my practice by providing that to my patients as well. It's mainly used for trauma and depression treatment, more so trauma because of the distinct symptoms that are related to trauma and how it affects our daily functioning, the flashbacks, the memories, the
Yeah,
changes in our behavior, um,
sure.
and our changes in our perception. So it's fascinating that a lot of the studies and a lot of the things that I've been learning in psychedelic training helps me understand the I just the, I guess, awakening process. Like, it taps into, deeper intuitive parts of your brain that allow you to heal, let go, and do certain work that, we do in therapy as mental health. Like, I do in therapy as a mental health clinician with my clients. But
Yeah,
then this now becomes something that could assist the process, and it becomes something that we could use as an intervention and as a tool, so that, they could heal certain parts of their trauma or certain depressive symptoms too.
sure,
Um, as I shared, just like with cannabis, there's a way that people could use medical cannabis every day, integrated into a wellness regimen that supports their lifestyle, their jobs, their families, the other responsibilities that they have, but still able to get the, the, I guess, relief that they're looking for. So, certain psychedelic medications, they offer similar reliefs, but
sure.
the effects are different.
Yeah,
The effects are actually much more powerful with psychedelic medications. But because of that, that's why it has to be controlled. It has to be carefully dosed. And then it's recommended that, if you're not familiar with those substances, that, you do it, in a, in the, in the auspices of a practitioner that's trained. But once again, so that's something that in the West Coast, whether it's Maryland, or up here in the New York, New Jersey area, it's something that we're soon going to be able to provide. The
sure.
way that the legislation is going now, probably within the next, 2 years, we're going to be looking at, a lot of reform and developments within the next 2 years for psilocybin. And then other psychedelic treatments, LSD as well, because these are all medications that at one time in the 40s, 50s, 60s, there are, my profession was so different back then, but there were actually opportunities that the federal government was giving to, therapists to provide these psychedelic treatments, and the training wasn't as extensive. Like, like people just used to do things, like, I hate to say it, but like, I don't know how else to describe it, like real, really, really nilly, like real loose. It's not as regulated as today. Today, everything
Lost it there.
heavily regulated, and heavily controlled. And of course, our main focus is to make sure that
Hey,
people are
Sonia, I think the Wi-Fi might have cut out a little bit.
oh,
Oh,
okay. Can you
you're
hear me?
back. Yeah, you're back. I got you.
Oh, okay. Um, yeah, so as I was saying, a lot of these treatments are going to be available in the future, mainly for people that are coping with mental health symptoms. So psychedelic intervention is for mental health. It's not necessarily for pain management or for any other ailments other than mental health.
And I mean that you brought up many key aspects. Micro dosing. Dosing with an expert, and then also what it can really do for depression. Because I know a lot of people who have experimented with it, especially as of late, have seen the benefits to depression, as opposed to some of the more traditional medications that they were used to. Uh, and so, a couple quick questions, just like a rapid round. Um, Basically, a lot lighter than the questions we've been engaging in. What is your favorite, Pepsi or Coke?
Neither. I'm more
Me,
like a lemon water, cucumber water type of person.
absolutely. Gotta treat the body well. You are what you put in your body. And so my next question is, what is your favorite strain and why?
My favorite strain. So I geared towards sativas. So I'm very, I guess, like generic. I know it probably sounds so generic, but I've always liked the what is it called? Jack Herrera.
Jack Herrera, yes. We
Yes,
love
the Jack, because
it.
it's a classic sativa strain. So I'm very much about sativas during the day, indicas at times of distress, or if I'm feeling extra anxious, or at nighttime, after experiencing a lot of stress during the day. So
Yeah.
I know when to use the right strains. But my
Well,
favorite strains are sativa strains, and Jack Herrera just comes to mind because whenever I see it, I get it just because it's like, one of my favorites.
yes. And I love to hear that. Favorite superhero and why?
Wonder Woman. I have Wonder Woman everything.
Ah,
I wanna. I have Wonder Woman everything.
a lot more women love Wonder Woman than I expected.
I'm
I will.
probably gonna be Wonder Woman for Halloween this year.
Hey, nice, nice. I'm gonna be Yoshi, and the kids are gonna be Mario and Luigi. But we're gonna have a
Oh,
great
cute.
time. Great time. Got a match. And the last question I have for you is what is the best terpene for PTSD or trauma? Because I talked to a lot of people about learning terpenes and what terpenes can do for you. So what is one of the best terpenes for that type of treatment?
I would say linalool. Um, linalool, I would say is probably my recommendation to give you anti-anxiety, stress relief. It's an anti-convulsant and antidepressant. So yeah,
Okay.
say
Oh,
linalool.
okay, awesome. That all good to know. And the last thing is tell people how they can stay connected with you. We definitely want people to stay connected. So yeah, tell people how they can stay connected with you.
So my social media handle is the Happy Therapist. On LinkedIn, you could find me at Sonia Singh, LCSW, LCADC. My website is coithealth.com. That's COITHELTH.com. So coithealth.com, the Happy Therapist on social media handles, and Sonia Singh, LCSW, LCADC on LinkedIn.
Yes, yes. Okay, Sonia, I appreciate the happy therapist, and definitely, I will call on you. When the legislative session comes and that hospice and medical access bill comes up, because I think you could probably
Provide
testify truth.
testimony.
Yeah, yeah. Speak truth to power. To that situation, especially in some of the work that you do.
Absolutely. Let me know how I can help your initiatives.
And you inspired me. Maybe I gotta get a trademark. The cannabis councilman, something like that. Like,
Good. So people started calling me the happy therapist at one of the treatment programs that I used to run. Long time ago. It was probably like, well, no, it's like 10 years ago now. Um, I trademarked the Happy Therapist in 2018, but the name was given to me by clients, by the male clients. It was like a silly thing that they said because I used to run a program for men, mostly men. It was a gender specific program. So we had a male program and a women program, but I ran the men's program. For men that were convicted of drug related crimes, they had to come into my substance abuse treatment program, and there was like 5 different therapists, but then it just caught on, like, they're like, hey, where's the happy therapist, the happy one. So,
yeah,
and then that was just me trying to, I guess, be positive and, you know, try to stay optimistic on the job and then with my clients because they were going through traumatic, tragic situations coming to us, going through the situations that they were going through. So I always just try to maintain like a very positive attitude with them. So it's just something that they gave me. And because it was, the name that I was given, I identified with it. It also became very much my business name at that point because once people started identifying with me as the happy therapist, I felt like, well, if this is how people are identifying with me and how I'm identifying myself, then I have to secure this because
mm,
anybody could say, "Hey, I'm the happy therapist," and it's like, "No, who you? I've been the happy therapist."
yeah.
So, just like anybody could come and say, "Hey, I'm the cannabis councilman," and it's like, "Oh no, I'm Martin. I've been doing this,
You
right?"
said hi, yes, yes. Well, I
So,
think you asked me how it became, and the person who
yeah,
runs this network actually
how
gave
did
it
you
to me.
start calling yourself the cannabis councilman?
Well, the person who owns the network actually gave me the name. When he was introducing me to people, he was saying the cannabis councilman because a lot of times when I talk to him, and when I talked on the podcast, whether it be mine or his, I would bring up cannabis in some way, and mention, of course, I'm a patient and an advocate. And so, that really stuck. And a lot of people just like, why are you the cannabis councilman? And there's not a lot of public officials, especially, so outward facing, that are open about being a patient, and, that are open about their advocacy. So, it kind of speaks volumes. Like you can be professional, and, you can advocate, for cannabis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, see, and then so the same thing. So somebody gave it to you, but
Yes.
people identify with you as being the cannabis councilman, and then you invest so much of your time and energy towards this, and you have such a expertise and niche being the cannabis councilman. I definitely would recommend that you go ahead and secure that identity for yourself, so nobody could just pop up and act like they're you.
Yes, yes. Well, like I said, you definitely given me inspiration, because I
And
didn't
it's
know.
easier
I
than you
didn't.
think. It's like the U.S. trademark website. You're smart enough. You could go on there and fill out that application yourself.
Yes,
You just gotta sit down and have lunch, and it'll take like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then you'll wait a couple months for the response. That's the only thing. That's how I guess the federal trademark offices work. The backlog, or the time that it takes for them to review your application is pretty significant.
yeah,
But you don't need to pay an attorney. You just your own information, and you know how to fill out forms, right?
of course, of course.
And I
Well,
think
I mean,
it's a very minimal fee too.
you are right. You can be your own advocate, your own lobbyist, and I appreciate that. And of course, wish us luck in November. As we have cannabis on the ballot, I believe the voters will definitely be in favor.
Oh, I have no doubt a doubt upon it. I mean, so Maryland had a legal market before New Jersey had a legal market, because Maryland had well, actually DC. It wasn't Maryland, it was DC.
Yeah, DC.
Had
Yes.
a legal market, because in 2017, we were traveling from New Jersey and New York to go down to DC, because we were hearing that they had delivery services and that they had consumption lounges, and they had things that in New Jersey and New York we still didn't have in 2017. So it
Hmm.
was road trip worthy to go down to DC back then.
Of course.
So at one time, DC was definitely way ahead of New Jersey and New York.
Agreed, agreed. And even though I'm in Maryland, a lot of times we accept it as a DMV area, but DC and Virginia, they're a little bit ahead of Maryland, but we hope to get it right this November. And definitely in the framework those conversations will continue after November. So definitely be engaged, because the thought is like you want to be a part of the process, right? And you gotta be at the table to be a part of that process, and speak up, and speak loud.
Absolutely.
So thank you for joining all the way from New Jersey,
Absolutely.
and I'm
Very
sure and I'm sure you'll inspire more people in the state of Maryland, and I hope that more therapists and social workers, and just people in the cannabis space can learn from you, and all you do for the community.
Thank you so much. Likewise, I respect the work that you do, and I hope that maybe some practitioners that watch this might, shift their perspective on, how they're thinking about either clients that either want to consider medical marijuana or have, some type of, opiate addiction history. They might, shift their perspective on what's available to them to treat them. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about it.
Yes, no problem. And we'll see you soon.
Absolutely. We'll catch up soon. All right.
Yes,
Take care. Bye.
that was this week's edition of People Over Politics. I appreciate Sonia for joining us, the happy therapist. Of course, long live craft cannabis. See you next time.